Hi, I'm Mindy. This is going to be my May wrap-up part 2. All of the books that I read in May outside of the Asian Readathon. I want to give you some stats for the month. For part 2 of the month, I've read 10 books and DNF'd 1 book. And for the entire month, I've read 15 books. For the second part of the month, I've read 6 physical books, 3 ebooks, and 1 audiobook. And for the whole month, we can bump the physical books up to 11. Like I said, I have 1 DNF for the month, 1 3-star book, 6 4-star books, and 3 5-star books. For the whole month, there were 8 4-star books and 6 5-star books altogether. I read 2,674 pages for the month, which is an average of 86 pages a day, which is pretty average for me and a really good reading month. I'm going to talk about the books that I read in order from the one I enjoyed the least to the ones I enjoyed the most. So I will start with the one book that I DNF'd, and that is The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks. This is what I would consider a classic in horror literature. It was originally published in 1984. This book follows a 16-year-old boy and looks into his life with his family, and he, his father, and his brother all have struggles with mental illness. His older brother is institutionalized, and they find out that he has escaped and is probably heading back towards them. But the 16-year-old is the one they should be the most worried about, because he has apparently killed 3 people and he is a psychopath. I thought that this book was really interesting as a character study and looking into this family and their way of life and their struggles. That was interesting, but this book is chock full. The 33 pages that I managed to read were almost completely made up of animal cruelty, animal torture by this young boy's hands. I have read books that have had scenes of animal cruelty and even animal torture, some of which are worse than the ones that I read in the beginning of this book. I don't know where it goes. I was a little worried to find out. But usually it's one scene and then the rest of the story makes up for that horrible scene. But this one was like, it was just full of it. And the little bit of story that was around all of that was not enough for me to keep reading. I just couldn't take it anymore. So this was a DNF for me. I had 1 3-star book this month, and that was The Drowning Girl by Caitlin R. Kiernan, which I had so many mixed feelings about. I didn't know, if I really hated it or if I really loved it. I decided that I was half and half. I half really loved it and half really hated it, which is an interesting take. That doesn't happen very often. Usually you're gonna be one side or the other, or be kind of so, not half and half. So this book follows a main character with schizophrenia. It's written from her point of view. She's not really doing well with her illness at the moment, and the book is very confusing. And this is on purpose. It is really interesting that she tried to write in this kind of scattered way that someone's mind might be working at this time in a person's life. Kiernan plays with pretty much everything that you can play with in writing. I think this could be considered weird fiction. It is a very strange writing style. She switches between first and third person. She switches between tenses. She switches timelines, going from different parts of her life and back again and all around. She's mixing things, a lot of figurative language, metaphors into her stories that she's telling about her life. And she's trying to figure out what is the real story and what parts were delusional. And I mean, I was thinking that maybe it was genius, but it was not the funnest thing to read at times. I just don't think that kind of playing with storytelling is for me. I will say a trigger warning in this book for suicide. It is talked about a lot of different people. Overall, I did think her story was interesting, and I thought it was good that they included an article that she had written earlier and included that in the middle, because then you saw how well she could write when she wasn't struggling so much with the schizophrenia. So that you can compare the difference. There were a lot of things that I really liked about this book too. There were some really beautiful passages, especially with the metaphors she used, that were so beautiful. They stood out amongst any of the other books that I've read for a long time. They were really, really beautiful, and I had to save them, share them. I also really liked how much diversity was in this book. There were many LGBTQI plus characters in this book, mainly lesbian, trans, and bisexual characters. And I thought that was really nice to see. But overall, this was a tough one for me. Now on to the 4-star books for this month. The first one is In the Valley of the Sun by Andy Davidson. This is a vampire novel set in Texas, and I really enjoyed the small town feel of this, the very Texas flavor going on with some really disturbing vampire scenes. Our main character is a man who is not a good man. He is a murderer who's had a hard life, and he gets turned into a vampire, and then he's hiding out in a trailer park, and he's doing odd jobs for the woman who runs it, and he gets to know her and her son, and they form kind of a beautiful relationship. So I really like the character arc of this vampire where he learns about his humanity once he's no longer human, which is kind of cool. I also read Witching Hour Theater by Jonathan Jans. And this is a tiny little 80-page novella. It was his first published work, and it was a cool little story about a man who loves going to the movie theater all the time, and one day a week they have the Witching Hour Theater where they play horror movies 3 in a row starting at midnight, so it goes until the wee hours of the morning. Then some very weird, horrific things start happening, as you might expect. I really like the setting of this story. It makes me miss movie theaters so much, and I really just wished I had a Witching Hour Theater event in my town that I could go to, because it sounds so stinking cool. There's a little bit of a romance going on in this book that was pretty cute and a good addition to the story. For the first 3/4 of this book, I thought that it wasn't very scary at all. It was just kind of a cool story that takes place in a theater and made me really want to be there and be a part of this community of horror lovers. And I was okay with that. I was liking it. I was feeling it. But then the last quarter of the story was super scary. So it turned it up about 12 notches, I'd say. So I gave this book 4 stars, and it was really stinking cool. I also read The Toll by Sherry Priest, and this is, it says right here, Southern Gothic horror with a contemporary twist. I think that is a really good description. This takes place in a tiny little town by the swamp in the south, and there is a bridge that is sometimes there and sometimes not. And if you go across it, bad things happen. A couple that is visiting this town that are going to camp out in a cabin for their honeymoon goes across this bridge, and then the wife goes missing. And then the husband goes into town, gets the help of locals, and they are trying to find her and figuring out the mystery of this bridge. I really like the small town vibes in this book. I thought it was atmospheric and creepy, even though I would not call it scary, but I think this would be a pretty approachable horror novel for someone who wants to dip their toe in. But I thought it was a great story, and I gave it 4 stars. I also read 2 short stories that were illustrated and published by Dark Regions Press. The Booking by Ramsey Campbell. This was the first book I've ever read by Ramsey Campbell, and I am very interested to read some more, something longer probably. And then Prisoner 489 by Joe R. Lansdale. I have previously read Edge of Dark Water by Joe R. Lansdale, and I absolutely love that novel. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I would definitely recommend that book. These ones were also really good. They were both 4 stars. Very different. other than that they are both illustrated and about the same length short stories, long short stories. This one is a psychological horror story about a man who goes to work in this old bookstore with an old man who owns it, and he's helping him get all of his books put onto the internet to make online sales. And things seem off right from the start, and they just get weirder and weirder, and it gets you wondering what is going on here. Prisoner 489 is about a man who works as a groundskeeper at a prison, and he has to bury a prisoner that was put to death penalty. And they have a lot of weird stories about this prisoner. This was a very creepy horror novel, or horror story. The Edge of Dark Water, I would not say is very horror. It was like a dark Southern contemporary type thing. This was horror, and it was creature horror. And the creature is not one I have ever read about, so that was cool. Originality points for sure. So if those sound interesting to you, I would definitely recommend these cool little illustrated books. Next, I read The Rust Maidens by Gwendolyn Kiss. I've been wanting to read this for so long. I'm glad I finally did. This book takes place in Ohio, in Cleveland, in 1980. Teenagers in this town start to change physically and actually start to turn to metal and rust, just like the town around them, pretty much. So this is body horror for sure. I would not call this necessarily scary. It was a really cool and engaging story that pulled me right into the setting and atmosphere. And I felt really, really bad for these girls and what they were going through. And I think it showed how other people might react to that sort of thing pretty accurately of how I think it might go. And the last 3 books are all 5 stars. The first one was my audiobook, which was Calibans War by James S.A. Corey, and that is the second book in the Expanse series, which is a sci-fi series that is really long. I got a long ways to go. That starts with Leviathan Wakes, and then this is book 2. I love this series, guys. It covers so many really interesting science ideas. Takes place in space. Humans still live on Earth, and they also live on Mars and in the asteroid belt. And some of my favorite parts about this series is the political intrigue, how the people relate to each other that live in these different areas. There's a lot of animosity. I have noticed that the first 2 books have followed the TV show pretty closely. I think it is a really good adaptation, but I still really enjoyed listening to the actual book, even though I've seen the show already. And I'm looking forward to continuing on. I also read The Reconciliation by Todd Keisling. This is a really awesome story about a rock band who is about to make it big, and they meet this mysterious gypsy woman who turns their life upside down, and it's one man's story of what went wrong and how he became the only survivor in the band. And the last book that I read for May was Where the Dead Go to Die by Aaron Dries and Mark Allen Gunnels, and I read it at totally the wrong time. It's very Christmassy and wintry, and here I am sweating. But I loved it. I still loved it. It is a different take on a zombie story. It takes place in a hospice where people that contract the zombie disease live out their last days. It did a great job of showing the human side to zombies. It was really disturbing, showing the slow descent into losing all of the parts of you that make you human. The main character is a nurse, and she has a daughter, and she lost her husband to this disease, and now she wants to help others with it. And there is a lot of peril and high stakes in this book. Very, very, very bleak, sad. Definitely cried a few tears. And I just loved how emotional it was and how real it was. And it's about finding found family and treating people with dignity, even if they are dying, basically. It was really good, and content warnings probably for all the things. So those are all the books that I read in May. For the whole month, I would say my favorite book was Revenge by Yoko Gawa. This was beautifully written and really strange stories that it goes to very disturbing places. I loved every minute of it. And my favorite book for the last half of the month was Where the Dead Go to Die. Even though it destroyed my heart, it was so bleak. It was fantastic, and I loved it. Have you read any of these books, and what did you think of them? Do you find any of them interesting, like you might want to read them? If so, let me know in the comments. If you like this video, you can hit like and subscribe, and I'll be back very soon with another book-related video. Thanks. Bye.